Journal 23. The initial grief hit like a tsunami, but once the waves of tears receded, I was left sitting in the aftermath of its devastation. It had been months since the funeral, and darkness clung to me like an anchor and pulled me under. Instantly, I found myself in unfamiliar territory with no hope or compass, trying to stay strong, but to no avail, and then, without warning, I was surrounded and running for my life. So, sleeping was virtually impossible, and if I wasn't tossing and turning, I'd wake up in a cold sweat with depression looming over me. Without my dad, life had become unbearable. Getting out of bed was a struggle because my sorrow had me in a chokehold. It was like I was in a constant state of disbelief. But to everyone else, life moved on. But I guess everyone handled loss differently. I mean, Kelly had been on the warpath. She was no longer lighthearted and fun-loving or a casual beer drinker. No, she had become a raging alcoholic. And whenever she visited, she was drunk and screaming at me. She said I was nearly grown and needed to move out of Mom's house. I didn't understand how she could get drunk and rage over things that didn't concern her. She was in and out of my life like flames burning hot for a moment, then leaving nothing but ash behind. But thankfully, the moment I stepped out of my bedroom, she was gone. In fact, everyone was gone. Apparently they were at a family function, but naturally I wasn't invited. I didn't care. Besides, I had more pressing matters to attend to. In my mind, I faced a dark threat. She embodied everything that I hated about myself, an image of compliance towards the oppression I had been trained to accept. She was strong, and in that moment I fought back every desire to self-destruct, but ultimately was blinded by my pain. In that brief moment of confusion, I decided to make a cup of tea, but then I heard the doorbell. And once I opened the door and saw Diamond's expression, my heart sank. She stood on the porch, clutching a green folder with sadness in her eyes. When I asked her what was wrong, she replied with 2 words, "Your brother." And deep down, I knew she found out about Pam. As we sat at the kitchen table, Diamond laid out the folder, screenshots of texts, dinner receipts, a photo of Nick and a woman with brunette hair at a bar, his hand on her lower back. I knew it was Pam. I told her that if Nick made her choose between him and peace, then to always choose peace. After that, Diamond waged war against Nick. The folder was a clear sign that Diamond had been building a case to leave my brother, and when she presented him with all the evidence, of course he denied it. They argued, then when he felt like he was losing, he raged and tore through the house like a hurricane. Everything that they built was destroyed. Diamond was heartbroken, and 2 days later she moved away. Nick blamed me because I was the one that told her to choose peace. And I heard through the grapevine that Pam discovered she was pregnant after finding out about Diamond, and shortly after Pam packed up and skipped town too. So that left Nick with nothing but time on his hands, and every time he came around, all he did was glare at me. Just then, Mom entered the room complaining about me and Norm, blatantly igniting Nick's rage. Things only got worse once Norm walked in. Instantly, Nick transformed into something unrecognizable. It was obvious that she enjoyed conflict. To Mom, her kids were toys she could manipulate. And once the fuse was lit, the fight broke out. I watched in horror as both my brothers fought each other. They were like 2 wild animals, punching each other with intense hatred. I begged them to stop, but somehow I became the target, so I ran. Nick chased me out the house as if I was the problem. In the rain, I ran and kept running until I couldn't run anymore. I went to a nearby park and sat with only the rain as comfort. I felt numb, alone, empty and devoid of love, like the world laughed at my pain. I felt my sanity slipping away, but I caught myself, fought back the tears, then chose to make a stand. Journal 24. The goal was always to rise above adversity, but I needed some support. I remember when I started seeing a therapist. It was like a breath of fresh air. She helped me get my first home, so I was living alone, in peace. But while I was basking in my newfound freedom, my family tree shook with laughter when they heard I was seeking therapy. While everyone thought that I was wearing a straitjacket while walking the halls of an insane asylum, I was in fact sitting in my beautiful home speaking to my therapist. She asked me what I thought about my family. I shifted my gaze and replied, "I don't think about them." She persisted, so I relented. I basically told her that in my family the manipulators get manipulated, that it's a never-ending chess game of favoritism that nobody talks about. I told her that my family enjoyed having slanderous parades and that my mom supported it, and that my mother used my heart against me and that I hated myself for allowing it. That sounds like your shadow self, she said. I had a sense of what she meant but asked her to explain. She said it's the unconscious part of the mind, driven by primitive instincts, suppressed memories, and shame. I told her I knew it well and battled it every day. And that's when she asked what I was most ashamed of. That was a sore subject for me. The feeling was intense and I could feel the shadow feeding on my melancholy. Back then, I drank too much and made reckless choices. On those nights, I shared myself with 4 different men. Each of them seemed charming and kind at first, making me feel wanted and safe. But afterwards, the warmth faded. That's when the rumors spread about me, and as I grew bitter, my thoughts became barren and lifeless. She ended our session with advice meant to strengthen my aura to fight the shadow. She encouraged me to journal my nightmares and negative emotions to reclaim my sense of power. She helped me gain a new perspective on my internal battle, but my soul longed for more, for a deeper healing and understanding beyond her words. As time moved on, my heart pulled me in a different direction, back to church. That day, I decided to speak to the pastor about my family and my nightmares. I carried the heavy weight of my depression as I entered the church, but when the pastor saw me, he smiled and said he could feel my aura the moment I entered. In that instant, a warmth I hadn't felt in months washed over me. In his office, he motioned for me to sit. "What can I help you with today?" he asked. And the moment I began to speak, it felt as if a burden had been lifted. I told him about my upbringing and the nightmares that I had been having. Instantly, silence filled the space between us. Then he frowned like he understood, as if my pain were a mirror of his own. I told him that my roots run deep. I am not the same anymore. Pain has changed me. "Changing you for the better or worse is a choice," he replied. Stunned by his words, I paused. He explained that I was caught in a struggle of spiritual warfare and bound by a generational curse. He said the human heart is powerful, and despite my mom holding mine, that I had to find a way to reclaim my strength, and that my heart would naturally attract people of light, good people, people like me. He went on to say that inside the heart is a spiritual door of endless love, and on the other side, God is patiently waiting. But to unlock the door, the key was forgiveness. But that many can't seem to find it in their hearts to forgive, and that they are the prisoners. And even though his words were piercing, I knew they were true. Later that day, when I returned home, I meditated on all the knowledge given to me, and I realized that all I ever wanted was peace. So I decided to pray for truth, and that's when I saw him, the King. He was made of love, strength, and pure light. And that's when he blessed me with discernment. He showed me that the time I spent with my dad was the bricks used to build a place of peace within me, a place for my spirit to protect cherished memories, a place to remember him. And that, in his absence, my spirit would have to learn to protect itself with boundaries, but that my mother would lead the charge to destroy all my defenses. Alongside her, my toxic siblings demolished everything in sight. They had no mercy, tearing down my essence, and because my mother's power was stolen, she took mine as her prize. It was the key that let them in, and in return they recruited others. They were cold, heartless monsters that were chaos-driven. They wanted my spirit broken so that wickedness could reign. And each time they tried to overwhelm me, my spirit exposed the truth and rose above it all. But my family were relentless. They kept trying to break me down. However, they soon found out that my resilience ran deeper than their cruelty. And each time I battled for truth, the more I realized that the attacks weren't going to stop. But my spirit needed to rest. So it was imperative that it protected itself and the light within, from not only outside invaders, but the very people that I loved. Because one day when I became conscious, my soul and spirit would align and transcend into something no one ever expected. A guardian of truth, the ultimate threat. They say God will never give you a burden you can't handle. I never asked for this responsibility, but I accept it. I used to question why I was born into all this, but now I know I was chosen. And that is the undeniable truth.